They made me scrub my boots before the elevator would allow me in. Dust isn't allowed in the Sky Spire. Men like me aren't either. Not really. Sandy nook grit, grease under the nails, pocket full of closure strips and IOU chips. But the courier's voucher blinked green, and up I went. 30 minutes of glass-sided ascent through storm haze and drone lanes, past garden decks, where white peacocks picked at solar moss, and a boy in a copper school uniform recited orbital treaties to a patient drone. The spire rose through weather like a needle through cloth. Maglev ribbons spiraled it in light. Maintenance skiffs skimmed the skin like swift fish. The elevator floor recorded my pulse and debts and decided I was poor enough to be harmless. I watched tsunamis of traffic below and remembered the quarantine fronts, the roar of sterilizers, the quiet of an empty town when the last generator fails and even the flies give up. The throne hall looked like a forest that had taught itself to be crystal. Trees of faceted glass rose around a circular dais, their branches chiming with air currents and erratic power hums. Courtiers drifted like petals. Chromed cuffs, ceramic collars, all gestures and calculation. Holograph seals rotated, blinking warnings about energy conservation, in tiny, polite scripts nobody in that room read. I kept my hands visible and empty. An old habit from triage corridors where reaching wrong meant someone died. A steward with cheekbones like a ruler led me forward. Address her as Your Radiance. Speak only when prompted. He flicked a lint stick over my sleeve and found more problems than lint. And don't touch the Queen. Fine by me, I said. I charge extra for royalty. That earned a hiss. We stopped at the foot of the dais. She stood there. Ava Seren, 27 by the feeds. A crown like a glass halo half sunk in black hair. Not tall, not ostentatious, just precise. Every line aligned with gravity, like she'd practiced controlling planets with posture alone. Her gaze slid over the hall and hung on me for a fraction, as if the grit didn't match the pattern she'd been promised. The steward gestured for me to kneel. I didn't. My knees had enough ghosts. I bowed instead, simple, tidy, human. When I looked up, she was already stepping down, moving through the crystalline trees, as if they bent for her. Alex Reed, she said, voice level, clipped. A commander's cadence wrapped in silk. You came from Sandy Nook. I came for the appointment, I said. The spire's air smells like cold glass. A breath of a smile touched her mouth, then protocol struck back like a snake. A glass bloom, one of the hall's shining flowers, caught her palm as she brushed past. A clean slice opened, bright blood beating in an instant. The nearest courtiers froze. The steward lunged, then remembered he wasn't allowed to lunge. I moved before any of them decided who outranked first aid. Closure strip, antiseptic amp, habit. I've sealed worse in the back of a truck at 60, under fire with my teeth. I held out the strip, waiting for permission I knew they wouldn't grant. Don't touch the Queen, the steward hissed, stepping into my space. She overrode him with a look, not a glare, just a decision that rearranged the room. Give me your hand, she said. Warm skin, quick pulse, the tiniest tremor where duty didn't approve. I anchored her wrist with 2 fingers, steady, neutral, and cleaned the cut in one stroke. She didn't flinch. When the antiseptic flared, she watched my face as if measuring whether I'd try to own the moment. Stings, I said lightly. Pays extra if you scream. Her mouth almost laughed, then hid it in her lashes. The steward made a noise like a swallowed objection. I set the strip, smoothed its edges, felt the faint heat of the polymer knitting. Her heartbeat ticked under my thumb, fast, then calming. A guard shifted, knuckles whitening on an inert baton that could paralyze a rhino and had never met real blood. Efficient, she said. Habit, I said. Queens and pipefitters bleed the same. Do they? She asked, as if she genuinely wondered. And then softer. Private. Thank you. We were too close for the room, fingers brushing, my breath a shade too near her crown. Not a scene for courtiers, not a pose for the feeds, just a human-sized contact that made the crystalline forest sound like it was listening. Somewhere above us, a flock of micro-drones reoriented, making a sound like rain practicing. The steward cleared his throat hard enough to crack stone. I let go. She didn't step back immediately. That was the mistake, by court math. The beginning, by mine. The Sky Spire requested your expertise, she said, regaining the angle of command. We have fluctuations, a system that ignores its own rules. Her eyes flicked to the sealed cut, then to my hands. Can your kind fix that? Outages are honest, I said. They tell you what failed. People lie. Systems pretend. The lights dipped a fraction of a breath, like the building had taken offense. She noticed. Of course she did. Something in her gaze sharpened. Not anger. Interest. Dangerous. Walk with me, Mr. Reed, she said, and the steward's jaw tensed. Protocol will survive. Barely, he muttered. We moved under the glass canopy. Guards kept a distance exactly measured. Protection without intimacy. My boots clicked on the black floor like they were apologizing for the sound. The crystal trunks pulsed faintly, blue-white like bottled weather. Inside one, a dart of light moved as if hunting. I read about your service, she said. Frontline med tech. Sandy Nook repairs lead dome ventilators for half the southern flats. You volunteered. Nobody else wanted the quiet jobs, I said. They don't come with parades. And now you're here. A pause, curious, almost hopeful? No. A commander searching for leverage. Why? Courier paid. My town needs filters. I need work. I looked at her bandaged palm. And apparently, you need a closure strip. The smile came back, small behind her eyes this time. Perhaps I do. We stopped beside a crystal trunk. Inside it, something alive trembled. An aurora trapped in a bone flute. The hum crawled under my skin. She watched me feel it. I thought of the steward's warning, of the distance expected between a man like me and a woman like her. A whole spire built on that distance. I thought of how her hand had warmed in mine in defiance of it. Mr. Reed, she said, voice lowering into something almost human. Do take care. The Sky Spire is not a forgiving patient. I've had worse, I said. Quarantine domes bite. Queens just bleed. She tilted her head, accepting the joke without flinching. We'll see. I should have been dismissed then. Names, roles, distance reasserted. But the electricity from the crystal tree echoed in my bones. Far below, the city hiccuped, rolling brownouts stepping from block to block like a giant miscounting its toes. A service drone stalled midair and had to be towed by another, like a child tugging a stubborn kite. Your reports say the failures start at night, I said. But this place, I gestured at the glimmering forest, pretends it's always noon. Her gaze cut to me, sharp and, for a heartbeat, unarmored. You notice patterns. I notice lies. I nodded at her bandage. And cuts. Silence grew, soft and reckless. Not titles, not orders. Just a small human warmth sneaking past the alarms. Under the skin, something started that the court would call a mistake. I called it oxygen. Evening turned the Sky Spire into a lighthouse for people who never sailed. Hollow kites skimmed the vault. The city below threw up its constellations. Advert halos, street markets stitched in soldered light. A pilgrim parade around a sunken water tower. I wore a borrowed jacket with the tag still pinging a rental fee. The receptionist pretended not to notice. The reception hall had a ceiling like a calm sea suspended over us. Musicians nested inside an artificial tree, plucking threads that shimmered down the branches in ripples of sound. Waiters guided drink orbs with palm magnets, gentle little moons that obeyed anyone with credit. I hugged a column and watched the room orbit itself. Ava flowed in late, and the room's temperature changed. Not warmer, sharper, like walking into fresh wind. She wore something that caught light and turned it patient. The crown was gone. Her posture wasn't. Lord Cavarus kissed the air near her cheek. He was all geometry and old entitlement, the kind of man who thinks gravity owes him interest. Our eyes met once across the noise. The cut I'd sealed had faded to a pale line under translucent gel. She touched it with her thumb, and then let her hand fall, as if remembering the watching lenses. I lifted my drink orb in a poor man's salute. She didn't smile, but something behind her gaze acknowledged the joke we were both pretending wasn't one. Then the light stuttered. A tiny blink, just long enough to make the hall gasp. The musician's threads trembled. My stomach tilted a degree, like an elevator miscounting floors. Gravity followed the lights, lazy and late. A tray slid. A diplomat grabbed it and pretended he'd meant to juggle. Someone laughed 2 notes too high. I felt the shift in my knees, old trauma weather. I put my palm on the wall's braided conductor vein and felt a cold static that wasn't supposed to be there. Another blink. Longer. The ceiling sea buckled, and the whole hall leaned a whisper to the east. People stumbled with expensive grace. A grav cushion squealed under the dais. A court logo flickered to a skull, then obediently back to a crest. She reached me first. Fingers clamped my forearm. Strong. Real. The kind of grip that says I trust you before the brain approves the message. Her guards were a heartbeat behind, but she'd already moved, drawing me toward a narrow alcove where a service panel hid behind a polite tapestry of star maps. "Do you even understand who you're touching, human?" she whispered, face too close for titles. "Someone who hurts right now," I said, bracing us against the tilted floor. The world steadied on that answer. Maybe only for me. She let out a breath she hadn't planned to spend. "Then fix what you can reach." The tapestry hit a seam. I slid fingers into it and found the manual latch. Bless the old engineer who insisted on those. The panel opened on a ribcage of conduits and an emergency toolkit that had never been touched. I grabbed wipes, saline, a microlight. Not for the wall, for her. She'd scraped her wrist when the room bucked. Nothing dramatic. Pretty blood is still blood. I cleaned the skin, watching for the wince that didn't come. Her eyes studied my hands, noted competence like it was contraband. "Your people file reports," she murmured. "They say you steady others by being unimportant to yourself." "I charge extra for poetry," I said. "Breathe." She did. I sealed the graze with a bead of quickskin and checked the flow below the panel. Cold air kissing warm cheek. Something power side was burping charges into the grav seasonals. The spire shouldn't do that. Systems pretend they're perfect until they break very publicly. "Stay with me," she said suddenly, as if the words had escaped protocol custody. "For the evening." "I'm a repair bill in a rented jacket," I said. "This room drinks people like me for flavor and spits the ice." Her grip loosened, only a little. I didn't ask the room. Heat settled between us, the kind grown people call foolish because they remember the cost. Her lashes made a small privacy around the point where our hands nearly met again. I was aware of the bridge of my nose, the sweat under my collar, the ridiculous obedience of my heartbeat to a stranger's nearness. A guard coughed the old cough of rules. We returned to the hall, changed like I'd changed filters in both our chests. The music recovered. The sealing sea pretended it had never surged. Lord Cavarus raised a glass to the concept of stability and watched her too long. The reception proceeded in choreographed civility. A solar tycoon bragged about a farm of mirrors afloat over a dead lake. A minister promised water rations would adjust compassionately, which meant less. A dancer spun in a dress that released tiny glimmers like shed scales. A child chased them until a nanny drone clicked disapproval. I ate a cube of something air-grown and remembered real bread. Ava moved through conversations like someone diffusing an antique bomb with a smile. Every so often, her gaze would check a wall seam, a light, a floor tile, tactical, not decorative. The cut on her palm stayed sealed, a quiet pact between us. She found me again near a display of archival weapons arranged as art. A ceremonial spear hummed softly at my presence, as if the spire wanted to tag me. She pretended to study the engravings. "You joke when I'm supposed to be afraid," she said. "You want honesty when I'm supposed to flatter," I said. "We're both misusing the evening." "What did you feel in the walls?" "Cold, where there should be nothing," I said. "Like someone siphoning heat and returning static." Her jaw tightened. A tick. The first crack imperfect. "We'll talk later." "Later, like a meeting," I said. "Or later, like a mistake we both noticed and didn't delete." She didn't answer. Her eyes did, with the kind of answer that would get a common man fired and a queen rewritten. The final toast rose. The light stayed obedient. The gravity pretended to behave. On the way out, she brushed my sleeve just enough to make a promise without saying who to. I stood under the sealing sea until the musicians climbed down like careful birds. In the corridor, she waited. Alone, but never unguarded by architecture. The alcove lights dimmed to a temperature that made privacy plausible. She touched the bandage again, then dropped her hand with a small, rueful smile. "I said we would talk later," she said. "Come to the observatory. Half hour." "I have a rental tag screaming," I said. "Bring it," she said. "Let it learn the stars." I should have said no. Men like me keep distance from fires we can't put out. Instead, I nodded, because grown-up gravity is choice, and mine had already tilted. She left without looking back. I stayed long enough to feel the hall resume its practiced heartbeat, then followed the corridor's flow toward the one room in the spire where people go to pretend the sky still belongs to them. We had crossed the line carefully, like adults who know lines cut. We were holding it like a cable drawn taut, humming with what we hadn't named yet. Want? Yes. Need? Probably. Risk? Definitely. But also something else. A steadiness I recognized from triage tents at 3 a.m., when two strangers hold the same side of a stretcher and don't need rank to move. When the elevator doors met, the whole spire sighed, as if relieved that everyone had behaved. It didn't know about the observatory. It didn't know about palms and small jokes, and the way a queen had grabbed a mechanic to keep her feet. It didn't know my ribs felt like tuning forks. "Later," she'd said. The words sat in my mouth like a held breath. I kept walking. The observatory sits on the lip of the spire like a teacup on a thumb. Transparent. Careful. Too high for the city's noise to climb. The guide rail hums when you cross into it. Pressure check. Identity sniff. A quick guess at your worth. Mine must have read, disposable but useful. The doors parted anyway. Inside, water runs upward in glass threads, gentle ropes of liquid crawling from a circular pool toward the dome. The null grav ring throws its halo, persuading droplets to behave like thoughts breaking free of heads. The stars feel nearer here than memory. The horizon folds like a hinge. Guards waited at the entrance, masks polite, weapons asleep. She dismissed them with a two-finger motion. They obeyed the person, not the crown. That told me more than their armor did. Ava, I started, then corrected myself because the air in here had rules. You're Roddy. Stop! She turned, and the dome threw her reflection a dozen ways. She wasn't wearing the crown. Her voice was the same and not the same. It's Ava here. If you call me anything else, I will ask you to leave. Alex, then, I said, and tried to slow my pulse so the floor wouldn't hear it. We stood with a city under us, and vacuum pretending to lean in. A faint spray drifted from the climbing water and jeweled her lashes. She blinked, unbothered. I took out a towel from my med case by reflex, then hesitated. Protocol had been loud all day. She lifted her hand before the doubt could root. You may, she said softly. Here, you may. I dabbed the fine wet from her temple, close enough to count the tiny fault in one iris, a fleck like a frozen spark. She watched my face instead of the stars. You told jokes to keep me from bracing, she said. I'm told I grip too hard. You do, I said. You grip everything like it might fall out of space if you don't. It might, she said, almost to herself. Alex, I don't want titles for 30 minutes. Deal, I said. I can be poor without ceremony. She tried a smile and overshot it into something earnest, the kind of expression the spire would find if it could. She moved to the pool. With a small gesture, precise, practiced, she nudged the field. Water gathered into a globe above her palm, then unraveled into filaments that climbed the dome like silver vines. You do that like you were born inside a field, I said before I could dress the thought. Her mouth paused. I was born in a clinic that forgot thunder. I learned to love switches before rain. A beat. Tell me about the war. So we dropped our titles onto the floor like heavy coats and left them there. I told her about Sarah, the soldier I pulled from a sunken checkpoint when the sand turned to glass around us. The way Sarah's breath sounded like a torn map. How she lived anyway, stubborn as rust, and how, when peace staggered in, she took a desk and sent other people letters. The day she sent me one, come home, idiot. The field ovens have eaten your side of town. And the next week, the coughs that didn't stop. The way sickness can be a change of instructions you never approved. I didn't mean to say the last part. It slipped out and hung between us like a dropped tool. You're Sarah, Ava said quietly. Is she the reason you carry closure strips instead of religion? She's the reason I think pain is honest, and systems aren't, I said. She's the reason I know when to shut up and hold a hand. Does someone hold yours? She asked. Not prying. Accounting. Not lately, I said. People prefer men who come with battery backup and higher ceilings. She took that in with a seriousness that made me feel foolish for being sincere. Then she surprised me. The sickness that forced me to become Ava Seren happened to a different name, she said. I was not always the one who wears the crystal and talks to the grid. The old queen's bloodline was a legal fiction. The spire needed a face with a calm voice and fast recall. I had both. They wrote me into the Seren contract because the city loves symbols when machines disturb it. You were conscripted by paperwork, I said. They crowned you with a clause. She looked at the water climbing. What if I say I agreed? The question hovered on the lip of denial. What if service is my first language? I'd believe you, I said, but I'd ask what they took to purchase that agreement. Her shoulder moved a measured millimeter. It looked like gravity complicated for a breath, and then gave up. They took mornings, she said, and the right to be ignorant of fear. A pause, and my mother. I waited. The dome hummed. A shuttle made a slow arc like a fingernail of light. Curator Seren, she went on. Not by blood, by design. The one who shaped the voice. The one who says the spire must be unconditional or it is nothing. a tiny, flinty sound in her throat. She calls me daughter when she is fond, asset when she is not. Sounds like a machine pretending to be a nursery, I said. She would call it a nursery, pretending to be a machine. We let the field sing a minute, the water's quiet music filling the part of the room where I'd have said something stupid. When I finally spoke, it came out too human to edit. You asked me to come here. Why? Because the hall is a theater, she said, and the reception is a contract. But this, she gestured at the upward water and the unblinking sky, is a place I cannot lie for long. Mr. Reed, Alex, I have been trained to purchase warmth, to schedule kindness, to file outcomes like receipts. It works on ministers, and it works on the feeds. It doesn't work on you. I laughed before I could stop myself, shocked and a little angry. Good. I'm not for sale. I noticed, she said, and her relief was naked. So tell me how to be with you when I cannot order it to happen. Start with names, I said. Then time. Then the truth when it's ugly. Then, I reached up, slow, to brush a strand from her temple, knowing the guards outside would break the door if they guessed. Then let me do small, useful things without a receipt. She didn't pull away. Her breath touched my wrist like a test. The upward water brightened, as if some sensor read our heat and indulged us with better stars. I felt that old triage calm settle in, that clarity that says, be here, exactly here, for the one person in front of you. We talked until the city turned the color of swallowed coins. She told me how the spire negotiates rain rights with the farms by buying their grandmother's new roofs and their children's school drones. How she signs contracts that move entire neighborhoods into night work to conserve day power. How she sometimes walks a maintenance spine at 4 a.m. to listen for cries the reports don't carry. I told her about Sandy Nook, the way we share filters, the password chalked on the desal gate, the repair lottery that decides which building sleeps cool on Sundays. I said I liked old things that kept their word, wrenches, dogs, certain songs. She listened like a tactician, then like a student, then like a woman whose ribs had discovered a new angle. Every so often she reached toward her palm, found the strip, and stopped. I realized the touch had become a ritual, proof. She had given me permission once, and it had not killed her. At some point, she tried to press a credit chip into my hand. Reflex, not insult. Protocol coughing in her veins. I closed her fingers gently over it and pushed her hand back to her heart. No, I said. Her eyes searched my face the way a scanner searches a border, looking for contraband, finding only hunger and stubbornness, which are legal but inconvenient. She nodded, slow, as if something had finally decoded. All right, she said. We stood with palms together then, not clasped like a vow, just aligned, warm to warm. The dome reflected our shapes into a ring of strangers who agreed with us by existing. I could feel the lines she'd been built on thrumming under her skin. Orders, debts, the call and response of a whole city. Under that, a pulse. The first thing I trusted. I found your voice by accident today, I said. I was hunting for quiet, and it kept following me down the hall. In a hall of symbols, she answered. I needed a living person. We didn't rush past what's allowed. We didn't wreck the door or the hour. But it felt like a crossing anyway, the gentle kind that ruins previous maps. We stood until our breathing matched, until my nervous chuckle finally relaxed into a silence we both owned, until the guards shifted at the threshold and decided the world was, for 1 minute, tolerable. When we parted, it wasn't much, a promise threaded through ordinary motion. I lifted her hand and counted 5 heartbeats through the closure strip and let go. She looked at my stupid rented jacket like she might order the city to forgive it, then thought better and simply smoothed the collar with 2 fingers. Till morning, she said. Till morning? I echoed. Not a command, a plan. On the way out, I pressed my palm to the dome glass and left a fog print that rose and ran upward with the water, as if the sky wanted to keep it. The guard at the door pretended he didn't see my grin. The hallway smelled like ions and flowers that can live without soil. I walked toward the lifts, with a chest too full and a future I hadn't priced. Behind me, the observatory returned to its pure functions, measuring, recording, pretending the heart is a kind of star. It isn't. But tonight it learned to burn. Alarms don't ring in the Sky Spire. They purr. A velvet ripple slid along the corridor outside my rental room, and the wall text bloomed. Localized calibration anomaly. Remain celebratory. Then the lights took a breath and didn't give it back. I was already lacing my boots. The observatory's afterglow hadn't faded from my ribs when the floor tried to forget down. I ran. The elevator rejected everyone with a smile, so I took the maintenance spine, ladder, conduit sweat, the smell of cooked dust. On level 42, I met a pair of servers pinning a musician between them like a trophy. They were not servers. Light-eating cloaks flickered at their edges where the grav misfired. Their hands were clean, too clean. Wrong hallway, I said, and kept walking as if I belonged to the noise ahead. They let me pass. My med case knocked my thigh, heavy with more honesty than I wanted to carry. I palmed a gel baton and wished for a simpler night. The reception hall had been repainted in shadow. People moved like badly trained ghosts. At the far end, Lord Cavarus curated calm with a raised hand and a claim on authority that didn't match his job. All is well, he called, and the building itself flinched in disagreement. Ava, I breathed, and pushed into the flow. I found her near the musician's tree, 3 guards tight around her like brackets. She wasn't wearing fear. She was wearing assessment. Her eyes found me the way magnets practice. Alex, she said, and something unclenched in my chest. A man in a courier's jacket slid from a pillar, speaking into a tooth. Phase 2, confirmed proximity, target in hand. I stepped between them before the sentence could learn to end. The guard to my left tensed. Ava lifted 2 fingers an inch, and tension obeyed. External outage, Cavarus announced from his little hill. The Queen will retire to the secure atrium. His people, too many to be coincidence, moved to collect her. Their uniforms didn't match the palace logistics. Their boots did not squeak where palace boots squeak. The steward who hated me stared like he'd been told to sit and didn't know how. Atrium, Ava repeated, tasting the word like a pill. Who's secure? Mine, Cavarus said, no shame. Your radiance, please. The lights dunked us again. This time gravity swam for a full second. The tree groaned. Someone yelped. That was the space I needed. Service tunnel, I said in her ear. Now! Her jaw flexed toward no. Command muscle memory. Then she looked at Cavarus's patience, at the way the wrong men were already angling their bodies to break our path into routes they owned. She nodded once. We moved. The tunnel hid behind a mural of victorious weather. I keyed the latch the way a frightened engineer would, not clean, not subtle, but fast. We slid into the narrow organ of the spire, cables veining the walls, heat sighing, valves ticking like anxious teeth. I pulled the panel after us until the mural was a thin bruise of light. A shout. Fist on metal. The sound of decisions catching up. Where? She asked, keeping pace in a dress too clever to snag. Docking ring. Section 4. Old shuttle I saw being ignored. I tossed her a filter mask. If smoke hits, put it on. If foam hits, breathe through your teeth. Directives, she said, almost smiling. I am fluent. Boots drummed above us, then behind. A drone zipped around a bend like an angry hat. I hurled my med case at it. The latch tore, sprays of bandage and vials erupting like a soft grenade. The drone coughed static and pinballed into a pipe. The pipe yelped steam. Sudden fog. I grabbed Ava's wrist and ran blind with her laughter hot on the back of my hand. "Messy," she said. "Alive," I said. "As advertised." We burst into a cross hall where the spire forgot polish. A janitor bot dozed under a sign that read, "Please respect quiet hours." Lord Cavarus's voice bled from the intercom, gentled into sugar. "All guests remain in place. The Queen is under my protection." Ava stopped. Not long. Just enough to look at the ceiling like it had failed an exam. "He wants the feeds to say I asked him." "He wants the city to believe gravity wears his ring," I said. "Move." We moved. Behind us, a new sound cut the steam, the rhythm of people who hadn't run in years discovering they could. The cloaks. My brain drew maps out of fear. The tunnel forked. Left smelled like ozone and old coins. Right smelled like stale flowers. "Left," she said. We took left. It opened into a maintenance gallery whose windows watched the city with boredom. Down there, the neighborhoods were in rolling brownouts again. Calm little islands of dark in a sea of trying. On a roof, someone had spelled, "Don't cut Sunday with solar panels." The city always bargains. "Override," I said, pointing at a hatch, and she stepped to the panel like a pianist to keys. Her palm lit the glass. It didn't open. "It wants a curator," she said, and the word hurt her mouth. "Then lie to it," I said. She did. Fingers darting, voice slipping into a register I hadn't heard. A cool authority that made the wall doubt itself. The hatch clicked, sulked, and obeyed. We slid into a ladder shaft that dropped like a throat toward the spire's underbelly. Halfway down, the lights above us became footsteps. I cut the emergency release with a tool that had been a toothbrush once, and the ladder's safety field burped off. We fell the last 3 meters into a net of old safety webbing that smelled like lost events. I bounced, swore, rolled. She landed like physics asked politely. "Who taught you to fall?" I gasped. "Curators drop you young," she said, and the joke wasn't a joke. The docking ring whirled beyond the next door, shuttles asleep in cradles, loaders blinking like bored insects. The oldest shuttle hung crooked, matte paint, scratched windows, a city bus that had learned up. A figure stepped from its shadow, weapon lowered but awake. The steward. His face looked like a rule book suffering a migraine. "I followed because I do not trust Cavarus," he said, "and because your mechanic appears allergic to doors." "Good instinct," I said. "Help me get her aboard." He didn't move. "Your radiance, Ava. This is madness. The spire will interpret flight as abdication. You will teach wolves to cook." Ava looked at him with something that was not command and not kindness. Something like pity for a man who'd been furniture too long. "If I remain," she said, "I am a trophy. If I leave, I am a person. Choose which thing you wish to advise." He closed his eyes to a narrow line, then stepped aside like a door that had remembered it could. We ran for the shuttle. Footsteps started echoing in the ring, bolder now. Cavarus didn't need stealth. Symbols were on his side. I slapped the dock control. The shuttle belched a disused cough. Systems scrolled their grudges. Fuel marginal. Gyros petulant. Hull pretending not to hear. Ava slid into the pilot seat because of course she could. "I am fluent," she repeated, hands finding extinct constellations on the console. "I'll buy you 12 seconds," I said, grabbing a loader and ramming it sideways into the bay door. 12 became 7. The cloaks poured through the far hatch, eating light as they came. The first raised a baton. I lifted the only weapon that never lies, a steel med case, dented, newly emptied, still heavy with intention. I threw it and hit him in the throat. He dropped. The second stumbled over him. The third called my name like we'd met. Alex Reed, he said, amused. Asset of Sandy Nook. Potential leverage file. Return the Queen. Come take her, I said, and felt how stupid and correct the line was. The shuttle screamed old metal and decided to be alive. The dock clamps released with a sound like regret. Ava's hands were music. The steward braced the hatch with his body, and an oath big enough to bruise heaven. Now, she said. The bay door didn't open. Cavaris owned that permission. The control light stared at us, red and sure of its eternity. Ava stood. She didn't have a crown. She did something better. She faced the nearest dock camera, lifted her bandaged palm into its eye, and spoke in the voice they built her to use when storms misbehaved. City of ours, she said. Not to Cavaris, not to me. This is Ava Seren. I am leaving the spire. Not to abandon you. To stop a theft of your will. Her gaze cut through the glass, through the hallways, through every screen tuned to a crisis. If I stay, I am a symbol they will turn into their proof. If I go, I am a witness. Choose with me. Open the door. Silence. One breath. Two. Then the bay door groaned like a conscience and rolled. We lifted. Cavaris stepped into the widening light with a smile trained for funerals. Run if you like, he called, sound riding the comms. We own the sky. Not tonight, Ava said, and punched the override on the external grav. The shuttle lurched, spat sparks, and tore itself clean of the ring. The city tilted under us. Maglev necklaces, black squares of patient dark, the sea beyond scowling at the moon. Inside the spire, alarms finally gave up purring and screamed like animals. Ava's hand found mine between switches. She squeezed. You said messy, she murmured. I squeezed back. You said choose. Below, the crystal trees of the throne hall caught the shock and sang. A wary, stubborn melody I could somehow hear even up here. A chorus for breaking rules. We set a course not away from the city but around it, threading the drone lanes like a rumor. Cavaris's pursuit drones woke late and angry. The first swarmed, then lost us in the industrial fog where the desal stacks exhale. Ava flew like she'd learned on charts and improvised on alleys. I patched the fuel line with tape and prayer and a bit of my sleeve. Where? She asked over the engine's bad grammar. Anywhere that isn't a symbol, I said. Sandy Nook owes me 3 favors and a place to hide a mistake. She laughed, startled and bright. Then let's be a mistake worth hiding. The steward sat behind us, bleeding from the forehead, grinning like a man who'd been demoted to human. Your radiance, he said, and corrected himself without her asking. Ava, you are legally kidnapped. It is the safest thing I can write in a report. Write this instead, she said, eyes on the night. I was rescued from a cage I was trained to love. We cleared the last ring of polite airspace and dove into the honest sky, scratchy and cold. The radio popped with offers of safe corridors that smelled like traps. We ignored them. The spire shrank into a jeweled thorn. My town, somewhere in that sprawl, slept on rotating courage. I chose her, not the crown. The woman whose hand knew how to steady and be steadied. I chose messy over museum, alive over curated. We left together, not fleeing intrigue, leaving a contract we hadn't signed with our hearts. Somewhere behind, the feeds were busy deciding what we meant. Somewhere ahead, the night had room for people who decide rather than get decided. Hold on, I said, and smiled into the dark. I am, she said, and did.